me set the stage for today's video. The year was 2004. It was the 4th of July, and my mom had dragged me off to her friend's house to celebrate. Now, this was an older woman who had no kids my age, no backyard for me to run around in, and especially, no toys. My mom sat me down in a corner, gave me a pat on the head, and told me to stay out of trouble. So there I sat, not having anything to occupy myself with, until he showed up. This was the host's older son, high school aged and off in his own world. And I will never forget this moment. He was holding a lime green Game Boy Color, its rounded shape and colorful design just drawing my eyes in. He sat on the couch idly playing it, paying me no mind, until I clambered up beside him to watch. I'd never seen a game console of any kind at this point, so you can imagine how wide-eyed I was. He gave me an incredulous look before asking if I wanted to try myself, and from there, I was sucked into the world of video games. I played that thing for hours, the entire time we were there. I was so upset about having to leave that the older boy just gave the Game Boy to me. Man, what a good Samaritan. And from there, I played that thing into the ground. I only had one game, Donkey Kong 94, but I didn't mind. The device just captured my complete imagination. By the time that the Game Boy Advance had come out, I was very slowly being introduced into the larger world of gaming. For the next, lifetime, I worked my way up through different pieces of hardware, always chasing that ever-evolving technical envelope. But my love of bespoke hardware never left me. That era of gaming had forever imprinted on a young, impressionable Jeeve. Those were my good old days of gaming, a time when hardware was limited and developers had to squeeze every ounce of power out of their machines. A time when optimization wasn't something we celebrated as gamers, but something that developers just did. From 16-bit consoles to early handhelds, it was all about making the most out of lower-end hardware. Fast forward to today, and while technology has progressed, for the better mind you, it feels like the days of going bare metal to the silicon are long gone. Well, almost gone, I should say. That spirit of efficiency and optimization lives on in devices like this one, the Miyoo A30, a retro handheld powered by an equally efficient and humble Allwinner A33 SoC. So the rundown on this device. The Miyoo A30 is a compact, pocket-sized retro gaming console that supports over 26 emulators, including PS1, N64, GBA, and more. It features a 2.8-inch IPS display with the resolution of 640 by 480, delivering sharp enough visuals for its size. The system is powered by a 26 mAh battery, giving you approximately 3 to 5 hours of playtime, and comes equipped with 64GB to 128GB of storage, expandable via SD card. Very standard affair in this price bracket. The design is sleek with responsive buttons, a serviceably bright display, and a compact form factor. But what makes this device really interesting is what's powering it. Before we dive into the features of the A30, let's take a moment to appreciate the chip running the show. In the retro handheld space, I never see enough appreciation being paid towards the internals of these devices, and a part of me understands why. At the end of the day, to most people, these are just low-end ARM chipsets, and it also doesn't help anyone's enthusiasm when the same chipsets end up in several different devices. It can get a little bit boring. But I'd like to challenge that perspective just a little bit. At the heart of this device is the Allwinner A33, an SoC that may not sound groundbreaking by today's standards, but has a fascinating backstory. Released in 2014, the A33 was designed as a cost-effective, energy-efficient chipset for budget tablets and low-power devices. It was pitched as a $4 SoC, which would have brought just enough CPU and GPU grunt to the ultra-budget market. A noble goal, but of course, it was panned for this. People just couldn't seem to understand that compromises would come with a platform like this. In my research, I saw a few weird comparisons to higher-end Snapdragons and Apple chips at the time. Absolute inanity. There was no appreciation for the fact that this SoC was a full-fledged 64-bit package that costed less than the price of a hamburger. The A33 is built around a quad-core ARM Cortex A7 processor, clocked at 1.3 GHz, and paired with a dual-core Mali 400 MP2 GPU. That's a mouthful. This is all fabricated on a 40nm process, which, while dated by modern standards, was perfect for delivering low-cost, efficient performance in its target market. The A33 offers 512 megabytes of RAM, which is enough to handle the emulators and retro titles the Miyoo A30 was designed to run. However, I would have liked to have seen at least 1 gigabyte. There can be a few hangups when suspending to and resuming from RAM. My thoughts is that fetching from that small and slow buffer really kills performance. Alright, disclaimer time. I have replaced the stock OS with Spruce OS. It's a community-maintained overhaul of the stock firmware, and it brings the device into a much more acceptable state. The stock configuration is a bit of a poor performer, and in my initial testing, that seems to have not been rectified after all these months on the market. At any rate, let's put the Miyoo A30 through its paces. We'll start by testing some classic retro games across different systems. So, PS1 was a bit of a bust for me. For some reason, I couldn't get my BIOS files to work, so I had a ton of performance issues across multiple games. Audio issues, freezing, system crashes, the works. Now, I've seen these games work in other videos, so I know it's something that's wrong with just my configuration. Not sure what, but I didn't have the time to quite dig into it. I'd say don't get this device for that library of games. Some will work, but there's no guarantees the ones that you want to play will be in that number. Now, I fared much better with N64 titles, but performance wasn't a straight lock here either. It was hit or miss. Heavy games like GoldenEye are just a slog on this system, but 40 Winks played exceptionally well. No slowdowns whatsoever. F-Zero X seemed to run at full speed, but had audio slowdowns. In fact, a few N64 games had audio slowdowns. And at first, I thought it was the system locking up, but the game speed didn't always match up. So it was definitely something else. Probably the audio buffer falling out of sync with the RetroArch cores. Super Nintendo used to be an issue on the stock firmware, but it's been drastically improved since then. I have no issues running any SNES games, so fortunately, there's not much to report here. It's also a similar story for Game Boy Advance games, which is super nice. No troubles for any of them here either, though that'd be really embarrassing if it was the case. Performance for this device has been a lot more scattershot than I'd like. I also don't like the fact that getting clean capture footage or performance numbers has been nigh impossible. I like my objective data. Though, beyond gaming performance, one thing to highlight is the battery life. With a 2600 mAh lithium polymer battery, you're supposed to expect 3 to 5 hours of gameplay, or so the marketing material says. Me, I get more like an hour and a half, maybe 2. Something weird is going on here with the power draw. Now, I don't have access to processor temps or sensor data, so my figures are going to be a rough extrapolation at best. But I believe there's some sort of excessive power draw bug with the unit. It doesn't make sense that PS1 gets nearly the same battery life as Super Nintendo games. So let's do some rough napkin math regarding the battery. It's a 2600 mAh unit, which equates to 9.62 watt hours. When I plug the unit into my wall meter, I get 6.5 watt hours of power being pulled straight from the socket. So let's pretend for a second that the unit isn't charging from the wall, but actually discharging from battery. What is that calculation in real life battery drain? Well, subtract the power consumption of 6.5 watt hours from the capacity of 2600 milliamp hours, and you get 1756.8 milliamp hours of battery, or 1.5 hours of battery life. That number for me is pretty solid as well. The only variance I seem to get is when I start lowering or raising the brightness level. The panel seems not to be very efficient. Lowest brightness settings nets me about a little over 2 hours of battery, while the highest brightness settings is about 1.5 hours, or maybe slightly under. Again, this is a hypothesis and really scientific conjecture. I don't have a proper way to grab readings from the battery itself. I can only extrapolate based off of recorded battery life and how much power it pulls from the wall. Most modern devices have charging ICs or integrated circuits that manage all the weirdness that comes with electricity and our electronics. These ICs govern how much power to send to the device and pull from the wall. Now, all charging ICs are not made equal. On a cheap device like the A30, it's very possible that they're using a bargain bin IC that doesn't know how much power to budget correctly, and instead it just pulls the same amount regardless if the unit needs it or not. So, say you're playing Super Nintendo games, and the processor only needs half a watt to perform that specific task. The charging IC may just pull 6 watts from the battery anyways. because it doesn't know what to do. Though, let's see if we can find anything going on under the hood. It's time to take a peek inside. Hey everyone, welcome to the teardown portion of the video. Now, I just want to apologize because the original setup I had was much better. I was going to use my actual DSLR camera and my main PC with NVIDIA Broadcast so I could kind of clean up the audio. Unfortunately, I couldn't get that setup to work. Camera for some reason didn't want to cooperate, so I had to improvise. And that means you get the really crunchy audio from me. Apologies again. Now, this is going to be a bit off the cuff because I don't have my notes right next to me, but I still remember all the general parts of this machine. Now, disassembly wise, my unit originally came with only, I think, one screw inside, so I had to add some screws later. If I can get a good look at this, you can kind of see they're not all the same thread size, but for my purposes, that doesn't really matter. Now I'm gonna first unclip this, then we can get a good look at it. Connector is gonna be very, very finicky, and I want to make sure I get this in frame. Okay, this is a editor's note. I realized that I'm gonna have to probably do this a couple times throughout this segment because a part of the disassembly is very rough. Now, for this battery part, I made it look way more difficult than it actually is. It's very easy to actually remove the connector. You just need to wedge a thin piece of metal in between where the battery connector plugs into the socket. Again, I made this look very difficult, but this was my first take doing it. I should have taken the device apart a couple times just to practice. But my mistake, your gain. Let's look at our battery. Oh, upside down, sorry. So you can see genuine Miyoo 3.7 volt battery, 2600 milliamps, which equates to 9.62 watt hours. Now, I believe I'm kind of recording these segments out of order, but I should talk about battery performance in the segment before this, and I think my theory still holds true. I don't have a probe to prove it, but with this battery being 9 something watts, 9.5 watt hours, and the device pulling like 6.5 from the wall, I think that it's a static power draw. I really do believe that this unit just, like the SoC just asked for 6.5 watts directly from the battery. And if that is the case, then they need to fix their integrated charging circuits, because that's a big issue, right? That's kind of why performance has been so bad. Not so much that the emulators and software use a lot of power, or that the SoC is even inefficient, because I've seen it in other devices, other cheap Chinese tablets that have larger resolution displays. They get much larger run times on the battery. So it's something mechanical that this device is specifically doing. And I don't have, like microscopic tools to check, but I think it's still fun if we go ahead and look at this device. Maybe we'll see something anyway. Okay, so with that said, next thing you want to do is unplug your speaker and unplug your screen cables. Okay, interjecting with another editor's note, and for this section, I struggled to unplug the joystick connector and screen cables. Again, I made this look much harder than it actually is. All you have to do is lift up the dark gray flaps on both of the connector housings, then the cables slide right out. Now, this is something that I know, but I recorded this segment very, very late, like in the wee hours of the morning, so my mind was not where it should have been. Again, I apologize for having to interject like this, but if you do decide to disassemble this device, it is very easy to take apart. These two connectors are probably the most difficult thing you'll come across, and even they're not that hard.
The Switch style joystick. Here, get a better look at it. Nothing fancy. Probably the joystick. We'll set you off right there to the side. And then as you see, our display was pulled out as well. Now we need to be on the hunt for any board level screws because I want to pop this out of place. And looky there. Oh, I'm so happy. Look at that. A33, baby. Allwinner. That's 4 cores. And you have the dual core GPU. Now you have to forgive me. I have to kind of look at this at my laptop at an angle so I can kind of see. This is upside down.
So during the teardown originally, I did not know what the chip on the green PCB was. I later did some research and figured out that that's actually the system's ROM chip. So for a correct board layout, you have the A33 quad-core chip with the dual-core MP2 GPU. Then next to it is the RAM package that has 512 megabytes of LPDDR3. And then the AXP223 chip is actually the Wi-Fi chip. So that's the correct board layout. So sorry that I had to ramble through this originally. So this is my last interjection during this section, and I really want to make sure that you err on the side of caution. Now originally during this, after I reassembled everything, it was very easy to put together. I ran into an issue where I could not get Spruce OS or my ROMs to load reliably. And my hypothesis was that somehow, some way, the contact points for the SD card reader got messed up. And after further testing later, I did confirm this. So if you do go to reassemble or disassemble your device, make sure you do not touch that SD card reader. It is very, very fragile. Now mine, I didn't pull it up from the contact pins. It didn't come undone from its solder joints. It's still connected, it still works, but the SD card has to pretty much be wedged in there. So it's not very ideal. That's why I don't recommend you taking the device apart. Just don't fool with it. There's no reason to go inside. This was more of an academic measure myself. This is a fascinating device, but one not without major issues. The stock software is bloated and ill-performing, the internal build quality is lacking, the battery drain problem is horrid, and the lack of adequate memory is, well, less than ideal. However, despite all those issues, the Miyoo A30 still manages to shine through as a viable budget platform for retro gamers. If you're looking for a device that lets you relive your favorite classic games without sacrificing portability or price, the Miyoo A30 and its Allwinner A33 chipset will not disappoint in that regard. And if you're looking for more technical analysis, reviews, and other tech commentary, then I also hope to not disappoint in that regard. Please kindly like and subscribe for more. I've got some more interesting pieces of hardware to look at, so you don't want to miss that. But until next time, ciao.